Welcome to the Hyperlocal Podcast. I am your host, Mason Ainsworth, and I'm excited and humbled to let you know that we are partnering with the Economic Developers Council of Ontario to produce the EDCO Award winners, The Deep Dive, a series of high-quality, in-depth conversations featuring the 2025 Award of Excellence and Bright Ideas winners. We'll be highlighting their projects, journeys, and their impact in their community and across Ontario. In today's episode, I'm honored to have George Borovilos. George received the EDCO Joseph A. Montgomery Economic Development Achievement Award for his years of service. And in this episode, we talk about his career, standout moments where it went well, challenges and how he navigated them, and the importance of people, collaboration, and community focus. Now, let's get into it. We have a pretty incredible guest with us today. A lot of you might know him from the sector. George, welcome to the podcast.
Mason, thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of the podcast series. I've had a wealth of great presenters and speakers in the past and great interesting topics.
Oh my goodness, you're making me blush for a second time. It's funny, just before we get into things, I just wanted to share a little story about George. I'm sure lots of other people have them out there. We were at this past year's EDCO Awards where George got his award. And I was looking up on stage and hearing some of the things about George, who I had not met up to that point, and thought to myself, wow, this guy is super impressive. I cannot wait to meet him. I need to make sure I find some time to go and just thank him for his service tonight and get to know him a bit, because it'd be great to have him on the podcast one day. And then later, as the night went on, near the end of the night, I see George and he's alone. And just like a shark, I hone in on George and I go, this is my moment. I'm going to go meet this guy. And I start walking towards him. And then, George, please correct me if I'm wrong, but George looks at me and he goes, Mason Ainsworth? And I'm just shocked that he knows my name. And then he goes, Hyperlocal. And I even become more shocked. And I go, yes. And George says to me, yeah, I listen to your podcast all the time. It's great. And me being a little, I would say, shell-shocked in that moment, I say to him, are you messing with me? And he goes, no. And then he starts naming off people that I've interviewed. So I was really impressed. And I know we had a great chat after that as well. But I just wanted to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because in that moment, I knew that I was doing the right thing, because sometimes it's hard in life to go and do your passion and do something that you think is important. And that validation from you really meant a lot. So thank you.
You're very welcome. And truly, I'm always impressed with people who have a passion, a desire to make it happen and try something different. And kudos to you. And it's that entrepreneurship that's really important. I have a lot of respect and just appreciate that people go through that and understand it. And as I said before, we got on the live, I showed you the Tim Hortons cup. Here's an example. I have two uncles with grade 3 education who own probably 7 or 8 franchise now for Tim Hortons.
Wow. Holy mackerel.
And just through hard work ethic, people skills. Their first language was not English. And they've taken it from a small business startup.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm sure you have lots of stories for us today when we get into it. For those who are listening, maybe outside of Ontario or even in Ontario, who haven't had the good fortune to meet you yet, I was curious if you could give us a little bit of your career overview. I know when I looked you up on LinkedIn, I saw quite a few different things in your economic development past, whether it be municipal or county or provincial roles. I was curious. The first part of that is, what drove you to go into this field? And then how has that path evolved for you over the years?
Okay, it drove me to get into the field. Like everyone else, we come from different walks of life. Not in my LinkedIn, but I actually worked at the federal government for 4 years before moving on to the municipal world, provincial world. And I worked at what they call a Canada Employment Center based in Kitchener. It's changed different names over the years. And guess what? I was a labor market analyst. And that was throughout my career, understanding the whole idea of workforce And workforce is so critical. And the story is, beside the office was the city hall. And in the city hall was the economic development office. And the director of economic development at the time was named Archie Gillies. Archie used to come into my office at the employment center and said, drop by. He said, can we talk about labor data? I need data. And here we are, flash forward 4 years later, we're all talking about workforce data. I used to help support him to track new investment to the city of Kitchener through the use of data and Stats Canada, stuff that I had access to working for the federal government. And that was my first little exposure, a glimpse into ECDev. A year later, there was an opportunity to be hired as the economic development officer. I accepted the position, and then my career path started.
That's incredible. And just being next door and having those conversations. And I find it fascinating. I know we're gonna get into this more, but the evolution of, from 40 years ago to now. So I will save that for a bit later, but really excited to dive into that a bit more with you.
By all means. And from there, that was my glimpse. The other side of the coin, I have a degree in planning. I did practice it in St. Catharines, which I can maybe speak to in a bit, but I've applied my planning principles throughout my different communities, whether it's Kitchener, St. Catharines, Northumberland County, the province at the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs that was known then, and the Township of Centre Wellington. It's really given me an understanding of how to use planning at the right moment to help clients. Because I have to take planning speak and make it English speak for the client.
I love that. And we've chatted about that a little bit on the podcast before, is making things accessible. So I really like what you said there.
Yeah, and because severances, committee of adjustment, setback requirements, zoning bylaws, what's that? I just need to get this project done because I need to get this widget out to meet this client's demand. And so these are the kind of things that you had to navigate. And that's where sort of the art and science of what we do in ECDev. So that's just a little bit of a glimpse of the planning aspect. What I've learned over the last 40 years, though, is I've at least had the opportunity to experience the whole economic development ecosystem. And that's just the phrase I use. But what does that mean in English? I've learned the basics of BR&E, business retention and expansion, investment, whether domestic or foreign, downtown revitalization, small business entrepreneurship, workforce development, tourism, DMO, destination marketing organization, last but not least, planning, and how to bring all those things together at the right moment. And depending on the position, over the years, that's allowed me to put that together. And as well, I guess I can say at a high level, working at those levels of government, particularly provincially, really gave me a better understanding of Ontario and the regional districts, the regional areas of Ontario, and the little nuances, whether you're from Northern Ontario, Southwestern, Eastern Ontario, or Niagara. So that's sort of been the career path, and understanding the dynamics of what we do in economic development, understanding how to apply your background to whatever community you begin to work for and continue to work for.
Amazing. Yeah, there's a lot of strings to pull on there for sure.
Oh boy, by all means.
Quick pause to hear from our incredible series sponsor. If you work with businesses in your community who are affected by trade, you're going to want to hear this.
Running a business that crosses borders? Then you already know. Trade never sits still. New rules, new rates, new headaches. That's where we come in. Peacock Tariff Consulting is your hands-on partner for everything tariff and trade, built specifically for small and medium-sized businesses like yours. No 2 days in trade are the same. We know that, we live that, and we navigate it, so you can get back to what actually matters, running your business. Peacock Tariff Consulting, your customized solution for global trade.
Now, back to the show. Curious, through this wealth of experience that you've had, are there any standout moments that come to your mind, whether it was specific projects or approaches that you've taken? And what do you feel went particularly well during those moments or that work that you've been involved with?
Well, looking back across the career, maybe we'll start with Kitchener first and we'll work up the ladder.
That sounds like a plan.
So picture 1985, the integration of computers in economic development. Commodore PET, using DBase 3 plus to assist in data collection. When I came on board, our data was in file folders, handwritten notes, newspaper clippings, courier font from typewriters, and we wanted to set up a BR&E program, a visitation program. So through the use of computers, we began to computerize that in 1984 to 85. Then the director was a new commissioner by the name of Bill Thompson. He would handle the larger companies. My director was Valerie Gerbeau. She would handle the companies in the business park, and I was responsible for the downtown and do the corporate calling on the small businesses in the downtown. And we collected all that data through the use of computers and began a simple BR&E program without realizing what we were really doing. And we were just visiting and trying to get a better understanding of what's happening in our community. A little side note, the technician that was at that time reporting to me was a gentleman who became the CEO and president and CEO of the Calgary Economic Development Authority 15, 20 years later. So that's his growth, Bruce Graham.
Wild.
So, small world. A young graduate, new computers, new technology, and took that to the next level. So that was fascinating, just the bringing in computers into it. The second thing I would say is a community improvement plan. We understood under the Planning Act that you could do it, and under the Municipal Act you can do a CIP, but we needed to spearhead downtown Kitchener in terms of its revitalization. Kitchener at the time had vacant industrial old buildings because that's how it was started, the city. You may not know this, but downtown Kitchener, before it changed its name, was Busy Berlin.
I did not know that. That's super interesting, but makes sense with the German heritage there.
Yeah, 1916, 1917, they changed its name. And we got involved with various business parks in the city and purchasing land and beginning to look at that. But we looked at Kitchener as an economic development force. We saw the emergence of Waterloo and the tech industry coming, and we had to position ourselves. So these are the kind of things we were looking at. Then I moved on to St. Catharines, where I did planning, economic development, and tourism. Then we decided to split planning. We went back, and I inherited economic development, and all of a sudden, overnight, tourism. The Chamber of Commerce was doing tourism promotion and marketing. The little side bit is that they wanted more funding. Council said no. Next day in my office were 14 boxes and the file. You've just inherited tourism.
Hey, you gotta love those politicians putting their work on the desk.
So all of a sudden I had to say, oh my God, I got to start doing tourism. And obviously within Niagara region, we had obviously a force and we had tourism features. And that was my exposure to tourism and creating a DMO internally within the corporate structure. And another achievement I thought was kind of interesting was I developed the city's first economic development strategy in-house. This would be about 1997 to 99, before economic development consultants came on board. And that was really interesting and a fascinating experience of doing workshops, facilitations, and just driving an internal strategy internally. As another tidbit, I would say, after I moved from St. Catharines back to Kitchener, guess who came on board? Brock Dickinson.
I was wondering if you guys overlapped at all, because I know you both have been involved for so long.
Yeah. Well, he gave me a call from Nova Scotia at the time. I'm applying for this job. What do you think?
And that just shows what a small world it is.
It really is. And that's the connection. And then Brock later on, as you know, ended up setting up Millier Dickinson Blay and MDB Insights, which is now Deloitte, and set up economic development consulting.
Wild. I wonder if your in-house report inspired him.
Well, I do not know. Got to do it. Maybe you can't find it. But then from Eastern Ontario, going to Northumberland after Kitchener was a real good experience too. What I mean by that, I learned the whole idea of regional cooperation. Yes, you're an entity, but think the larger. And Ontario East Economic Development Commission, they were an unbelievable group of people. Chris King's still there, Jay Amer, a whole bunch of people are still there, and they were just a wonderful group. And we just worked together on trade shows, missions, events. We worked as one force. So that taught me about regional cooperation, and that was my learning there. Another little thing I did, Northumberland County has 7 municipalities. It was an upper tier municipal government, and they all said they're investment ready. I actually created the first investment readiness scenario with a US-based site selector that we brought in. And we tested the companies through two scenarios, tested the county and the 7 communities through 2 company scenarios. It was quite fascinating.
Well, I think that's great. And George, I think you highlight something really interesting there is you don't really hear about the testing that goes on with a lot of these things, right? And it's just like anything in life. If you were going to get a car or if you were going to get something else, like you probably want to test the thing first before you take it out into an area that's important. So I think that's something really good that you folks took the time to test that investment readiness, and definitely something I want to hear more about in the future. So just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, and of the 7 communities, the smallest of the 7 was Campbellford, less than, I think, 3,000 people. It was headed by Brenda Otto, who's an EDAC director in Stony Plain, Alberta, and she rocked it. And Brenda not just rocked it, but the planner and engineer, I almost thought they were EDOs. They were part of the scenario, and she had them speaking like EDOs. And so they showed a united front, and the consultant picked up on that. So it's a lesson learned for economic development professionals. You can't create roadblocks. You got to work through it. That means you have to understand the personalities of the engineer, the personalities of the planners and other officials, and how to work with them and how to make them understand what you're doing. And I would not name one of the 7 communities, but one community did not participate, and that's a set of red flag too.
Yeah, that's fair.
So these are the learnings you get. Then evolution moved me to the province, where I got into foreign direct investment. And as a result, I had the opportunities to land a few large companies over the years. Example would be Kellogg's and Dr. Etker, the pizza guy.
Very cool.
And that was an interesting experience. The province was competing against the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin was throwing about $13 million on the table. I think the province eventually kicked in about $7 million. We had to build not just why Ontario, but we took it a step further. The team and I said, how do we get into the mind of the board of directors of this company? So we approached it a little differently. Yes, we said within 100 kilometers, you can source all your products. But more importantly, we really build a customized profile for them. We took the 10-point PowerPoint slide, the typical why your community, in this case, why Ontario. We customized it into a reading document, threw in the colors of the German flag and everything. We got into the cultural mindset. And we said, do you really want to be in the United States or do you want to be in Canada? Do you want to be in Ontario or Wisconsin? They said Ontario. End of day. And so in other words, understand who you're dealing with and how to deal with it. And then another little sidebar was called diversification. I had an export team at the province responsible for food and beverage companies. Most of our food and beverage companies who exported went to the United States with 85% of the product. Over the 10-year period with the province, we got it down to 75% because we wanted that extra 10% to go to new emerging markets. So we started looking, do not be dependent on one country. We were looking at economic diversification. So,
which is funny because, as you know, we're having those conversations yet again years and years later.
So that's just a little bit of a flavor over the 40 years, a few of the highlights that I've been involved with directly with my team. Oh, there's probably a lot more, but these are things that come to mind.
Before we continue, a short message about one of our partners. If you've noticed Hyperlocal stepping up its game lately, that's thanks to Michelle at Storied Places Media. She's a former economic developer and broadcaster who truly gets our goals and our audience. Storied Places produces audio and video podcasts specifically for economic development organizations. They can support your host with the technical side or basically do everything for you, from providing a host to editing the episodes for you and even writing your social media posts. Learn more at storiedplaces.ca. Thank you so much for taking the time to share that. I know I was taking some good notes there and definitely had a lot of good things to say. And you mentioned the one council with the tourism vote and stuff. So I'm sure there's also been many other challenges over the years. I'm curious, what were some of those biggest hurdles or barriers that you've encountered over the years, and how did you work through them? And for others, as you know, within the field, that's just part of the job, is there's always going to be barriers and hurdles. And a big part of that is problem solving. Any advice for folks who are maybe dealing with problems right now as well?
First, be patient. 2, read your audience and figure out your touch points. And 3, know how to navigate that intricacy. And again, I'll give you an example. In Northumberland County, I learned a lesson, a positive lesson. We were at a budget meeting. My colleague, the director of engineering, a wonderful lady, she stressed the importance of having a capital budget for infrastructure. So I watched her carefully. She said, we need money for roads, bridges, and other structures. She used photos. She showed a photo of a bridge with exposed steel. She said to council, well, if you've helped me fund it now, I can fix the bridge, and that requires some money. If you don't want me to fix this problem, it's going to get progressively worse, and then I'm going to have to shut down the bridge. And it's going to cost a complete budget of a new bridge. Are you ready for that? And guess what? Council said, no. Her budget got approved. I took a step back and I said, the life lesson for economic development is we need funding. How do we build our community? And that's sort of the hurdle. And I say the results do not happen overnight. The community doesn't happen overnight and get fixed. It happens over time. So you have to invest in staff and budget to help us retain and attract new investment, or we're going to get tired looking. And you want a new business park? You want to be investment ready? Do you want to create regional partnerships? That's the lesson, to expose it to not just council, but senior management at the time. And what I found, we have to become storytellers. And the key is to demonstrate through the use of examples and storytelling what that makes a difference. Also find champions in your community who can speak for you. And that was sort of the lessons I learned in trying to make that happen and educate.
I think that's bang on there with what you said about being a storyteller and giving those examples. And as you know, especially when it comes to elected folks, a lot of them might not have a background in planning or in economic development or waste diversion or any of the other million things that municipalities deal with. And it's not their fault.
No.
But if you can explain it, as we've talked about a couple times, and have that accessible language, and also tie in, whether it be the photos, I love that idea, and that story of, hey, here is the logical, I would say, road of how this goes, and just laying that out for people. And I think obviously they make the decision at the end of the day, but as long as you provide that information in an accessible way, I think it's probably going to be a higher percentage of a successful outcome from those things.
Right. And then I can flip all this and give you another example. And let's go back to Kitchener on an example. There was an RFP issued by the federal government, request for proposal, to decommission the Kingston Prison for Women. It was an old facility. They were looking at a new modern facility. Internally, we discussed it. We said, let's go to council with a report. And we asked council, do you want us to move forward and to us to submit an RFP for this prison for women? Because we had a potential site that we thought could fit. We did a field trip with council members as well as staff to get a better idea of what's involved with a prison facility. What are the issues? One of the biggest learnings that everyone, when we came back in various vehicles and we had a debrief, was, whoa, we had a stereotype image of an inmate. Most of those inmates did crimes of passion in protecting loved ones, as opposed to the hardcore criminal. So unanimously, council said, and staff, we're going to go for this. We found a site. We were successful. We had an open house. One of the most controversial events I've ever been in. It was across the neighborhood, separated by the major artery. Oh, our home prices are going to go down. Everything's going to be devalued. You're going to have a whole bunch of problems. Yeah, there's been some internal small issues of that facility, but in the end, it's quietly been in the background, and it's quietly done its job, helping move inmates to hopefully back into society. What I found interesting was the decision was made not based on wealth creation or jobs. It was made on passion and humanity.
I like that. Passion and humanity. Yeah, I think we need more of that in the world right now.
Yeah, and that's how we made it. I mean, it wasn't a high-end, first-class automotive parts manufacturer, but it's quietly in the background doing its thing. That's some of the things you learn. So in the field, you think hardcore, we got to get jobs, investment, but sometimes it's just the small little things that are important as well.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny doing the podcast and speaking to so many folks like yourself and tying the pieces together in my mind. Something that Brock said and Paul said is this idea of, well, why are we actually doing some of these things? Is it just to increase the tax base? Yeah, like that's great, obviously. Or is it to help people out? Is it to make your community better, give people opportunities? Like there's so many different variables. And I think that's something that we always need to think about, especially when you mention passion and humanity and actually helping other people. I think that's good because sometimes the numbers might not necessarily lean in that direction.
I agree. And even in my little role in Centre Wellington, helping an immigrant couple from Iran, finding a location and connecting them and seeing the joy when they open their little store. And I said to myself, imagine if I had to be in their position. So I guess the learning for me, and maybe an economic development professional, put yourself in someone else's shoes. And coming from my background, even as I cited my uncles, put myself in their shoes. And my grandparents who came over early with no English as well, and how they started as entrepreneurs. So I have an affinity for those small business entrepreneurs, owners who have an idea and they take it to the next level.
100%. And as you know, without them, like pretty much nothing would exist within our country. Small businesses are the backbone of our communities. That's the
Yeah.
reality. Without them, there wouldn't be any sponsors for the Little Kids League of soccer or baseball. There wouldn't be this big tax revenue that's coming to help offset the residential taxes. There wouldn't be jobs for people to work at. And I think that's something a lot of the times that people sometimes forget. And it's these companies didn't just happen overnight. They were because people decided to take a chance and invest in their ideas or in partnerships with others and things like that. And I think especially the risk component to that, and we've
Oh,
talked about on the podcast before that the government is very risk adverse. But sometimes you need to look at that perspective of can you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, as you said, and see where they're coming from on different perspectives. So I think that's good sage advice. Thank you.
you're very welcome.
I know we've talked a little bit about this, but people collaboration as well as community focus. I know when I did some online searching on you, I saw that the township has noted that your approach shows economic development is more than business attraction. It's about people, collaboration, and building resilient, inclusive communities. I'm curious, based on that quote that they have up for you, how has that people centered philosophy shaped the way that you've worked throughout your career?
It seems like a little rhetoric, but how do I say this? I just say it this way. Township of Centre Wellington was a one-person operation, really. I had once responsibility for over 300 people. So I've seen different sizes of organizations. But what I have learned in any type of leadership role, clearly you have to engage, support, and guide your team members. That's typical rhetoric. But you also have to take the hit when the tides are against you. You're steering the ship. If you're a leader, you have to believe in your team and the organizations around you. And sometimes you have to take the hit. And that's why I believe in supporting the team. Giving them enough rope to give them confidence and knowledge, put the team before yourself. The only time you dive in is if something's broken. Then you obviously have to look into it. But you have to engage someone, help them nurture it. You got an idea? Okay, show me how it's going to work. And encourage them and support them. I remember at the MAFRA, we had an export buyer's mission. We would bring in retailers from overseas, again, towards the diversification, introduce them like a dating service to local food companies, and one-on-one. We had an event, usually around a food show, and then meetings on the side, one-on-one, and just bringing them together. It wasn't someone else's idea, and I just supported it. I said, this makes sense. So nurture it and support and guide, and then sell it. Then your role is to tell the story to the senior management, why you're doing this, and here are the results, the return on our investment. That little unit in export, for the $1 million operating budget of that unit between staff and marketing dollars, generated, we could prove it through statistical analysis and performance measures, $17 million a year.
Wow, that's incredible.
So we had performance metrics too to tell the story. So yes, they're going to this trade show, but this is the return on the investment of this trade show. But again, going back to the community focus and the people focus and just giving them and encouraging them. The other approach that I've done, and it's hard, you have to take time, is meet with people. Meet with your team. Have one-on-one. I had a role once at the province, a regional role, and none of the directors in the past ever visited the regional offices. I was flabbergasted, to be honest with you. I spent the time driving to all our regional offices at the ministry, meeting the front staff to get an idea what their day looked like. So you can't stay from your little chair. You have to move into the field and talk to people. And there's my people focus or my people-oriented philosophy.
I love that. That reminds me of a political guy I know, and I think he was the AG back in the day with the Mulroney government. And he always told me on the political side, he said, you got to go and kick the tires. And I always thought that was such a cool thing. And it's exactly what you're speaking to is, hey, you know, if you're working with others or you're working on specific types of projects, if you have that ability, you should for sure be going to meet those people where they are and seeing the issues, because there's a big difference between looking on a budget about, oh yeah, XYZ bridge like needs to get fixed. But if you don't actually see that through a photo or take the time to go there yourself, you're not going to see the real impact, especially if someone's not there to tell you that story in an accessible, approachable way. So I think finding out for yourself is really crucial.
I agree. And you get to see the dynamics and what clients walk in, what kind of needs do they have? It's just not, oh, it's not functioning, the volume's down, but the people they're still servicing are still very important. So it tells me something else. So again, kick the tires.
I love that. That's good. And I know you've provided a lot of good advice, George. Just to build on that a little bit more, what advice would you offer to emerging economic development professionals or communities who are looking to build up a bit stronger, or maybe move towards more of this collaboration that we've talked about across their own work?
Okay. So our profession is changing. We got data analytics coming into it. We've got geographic information systems. We have AI. They're all important tools. And I'm taking a step back and saying these are really important tools to understand your community. And that's important for economic development professionals. But at the same time, please don't forget the human dynamics. In other words, the emotional intelligence you need as an economic development professional. There are people a lot smarter than me, higher IQs, but it's the soft emotional intelligence skills that you need. How to read the room, how to know what to say, when to say it. What's the tone you need? There's not a magic formula, but it's understanding the EI of it, and that builds the collaboration and how to leverage groups to help support your efforts in the community. And if that's anything I could say, do not forget the face-to-face at the end of the day.
100% agree. It's funny you mentioned AI and EI. I heard a discussion recently, and it was talking about IRL, which I remember from gaming, which was in real life.
Okay.
And they were talking about how a lot of people don't have, and they were calling it IRL, in real life skills, which really speaks to this face-to-face, reading the room. I know we've chatted about it in other episodes about like that political acuity where you know what's going on and how to deal with something. But I think that's so crucial, especially in the age of AI, where everyone is really leaning into these different programs or chatbots or services and even automating some messages and things like that. But you can't automate your messages when you're in front of somebody in a boardroom trying to pitch them on your community and that they should invest there for whatever that reason is. So I think some training and some polishing of those skills is really crucial.
That just reminded me of something as I listened to you here, Mason. I'll give you an example of this. You might find it interesting. Your listeners as well. Let's go back to Kitchener, early 80s. As I said with the CIP, we had a major decline, vacant old industrial buildings, a whole bunch of brownfield sites because of the industrial uses, tired building facades. The growth of suburbanization, Kitchener-Waterloo was growing outwards as part of Waterloo region. But downtown had social problems, drugs, homelessness, prostitution. So we're going to put a CIP in? And then I said, wait a minute, take a step back, George. Let me understand the dynamics of the downtown. And maybe this came from my roots growing up in Cabbagetown, one block from Regent Park, before Regent Park was revitalized. So Regent Park was a lot different makeup. And I knew the alleys of Cabbage Town. And I said, what's going on here? What's happening to downtown Kitchener after hours? In other words, after 9 to 5. So I need to understand the social issues. Because if we're going to make something better to get it to where it is today, with a tech hub, with Communitech, the School of Pharmacy, the Google factory, we had to understand what's happening in the downtown. So I had a neighbor. He used to be a police officer back in Trinidad. We talked about the social issues. He said, George, let me scout out the downtown for you. In 3 hours, he identified every hot spot for me. He knew every spot in the alley, what's happening, where the drugs happening, other issues are happening. So I said, before we figure out the physical front, the lesson I learned for problem solving for professionals, you have to understand the other dynamics. Think of things abstractly. Think things a little differently. Just don't say, we're going to create a nice little plan and make it pretty. Because you can have a facade looks pretty, but in the back, you can have problems. So these are the little things we found out. We also found out that individuals in Waterloo were giving people a couple bucks homelessness to say, go down to Kitchener and stay there. And so these are the little dynamics you learn. And that's really important. And that's how we looked at the CIP from a human perspective, but also changed it around.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And it's interesting. You mentioned this is back in the 80s. I definitely see a lot of parallels to some of the stuff that's going on today and some of the discussions, especially about BIAs and such, and homelessness and drug addiction. And these are not quote unquote new problems. And so I think what she said is, oh, this is perfect, George. You're going to love this. Looking behind the facade. There we go.
You have to look behind the facade,
Yeah.
and you have to scratch that surface and see what the real root of the problem is before you can make it pretty.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I was talking to a friend the other day about a specific topic. I won't mention what, but I was drawing a parallel to doctors. And hey, if you're operating on somebody and you can't see what's going on or feel what's going on or what have you, like, you're not really going to do a great job. You have to understand what the problem is before you can fix it. So getting the information out there, taking the time to look into it, understanding how the different pieces like fit together and work. And I think that's a big crucial part if you expect to be able to help with the situation, as you need to understand the pieces behind the scene.
Very much so.
So moving on a bit further, George, receiving the EDCO Joseph A. Montgomery Economic Development Achievement Award is a significant recognition, not only of your leadership and contributions, but of the time and the mentorship you've provided to others in the scene. I'm curious, what has this honor meant to you personally as well as professionally? And then also, did you have any run-ins with Joseph in the past?
Well, when I received that award and I reflected back, hey, yes, I know Joe very well. I could call him Joe. My first encounter with Joseph Montgomery, aka Joe, was back in 1985. So 1985, there was a regional event. EDCO then was called the Ontario Industrial Development Council, OIDC. It became EDCO in 1991. I sat at a table with Joe Montgomery. What a charismatic personality, larger than life. He introduced me to everyone possible. This is the new kid on the block. This is George. Welcome. I met all the senior economic development officials all over the place. He was so passionate about the profession. He wanted it to grow. Actually, he was one of the founding fathers of OIDC back in 1957.
Wow, that is awesome.
He emphasized to me at that time, and every time I met him in many conferences, many events, the EDCO conference in particular, and even EDAC conferences, he talked to me about the importance of personality, importance of networking, and helping people. And that advice stuck with me. So 40 years later, I try to endeavor to practice that. And he exposed me the first time foreign direct investment, because Joe was going to Germany to find manufacturers to come to Ontario, particularly Niagara Falls. It was the flavor of the day because we have companies that fit the German model. He was just so great. And as a result, I tried to demonstrate that through leadership and contributions. It was probably not in my LinkedIn or my resume. You may not know this. I taught the Year 1 and Year 2 Economic Development Certification course for over 30 years.
Wow, that is very cool. I did not know that.
Bill Thompson said, George, we need somebody. And I think it was Jim Bader who had the economic development program then, and then it was Paul Parker, and then it's moved on. Are you ready for this? I went to Gander, Newfoundland for my first lecture, Computers and Economic Development.
Interesting.
That was my first lecture. I taught mostly the marketing and BR&E program for the 30 years. I also taught the master's program at University of Waterloo, the MAES program at the time, for about 10 years, did the marketing course in public sector marketing. What I found rewarding for me was to see the career progression of those students who are now directors, managers, senior people in the profession, and get to see them at the EDCO or EDCO conferences in the past were just wonderful. That's my reward. That's my gratification, to see their growth and development and see where their careers have taken off. So that was my learning, and the program at Waterloo was fantastic. I had so much fun there and just enjoyed it.
I love that. I think that is so special. I really appreciate you telling the story about Joe, bringing you in and introducing the other folks and things like that. I think those things are so crucial. And I will say, I think my minimal involvement with EDCO so far has been absolutely fantastic. It's been extremely welcoming. Even the story I started off with about running into you, and it's like, what a cool experience to have and to feel welcome in an area and be introduced to people. And I think that's something very special. And what you mentioned about personality, networking, and helping people, I think those are such crucial things. And like even the basics of like personality, like just get along with people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like ask people genuine questions and be interested in who they are as people. And that leads you to, better networking. And then as you know, if you have more of a network, that makes helping people a lot easier sometimes, because you know who you can reach out to find the information you need, or if you need some political support, who actually makes these decisions, or if you just need some boots on the ground to go check out a bridge or something.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. It's networking. I could pick up the phone and say to anyone, Cephas, Penshaw, and Tilsonburg, or anyone else, hey, we're doing a business park. You got a report you took to council? You just know where to go. I just knew where to go to find information. Or professionally, or on a personal side too. Sometimes you had tough times in the organization. You knew who to talk to, who would lend an ear or give you advice. And, stories about consultants and who you're hiring and who's good, who's not so good, and little things like that.
Yeah, fair points. I know we're getting close to time, so I'll wrap us up here in a little bit. But one more
Okay.
question before I do that. As you reflect on your career, and I know we've talked a lot about it today, and now I know that you're retired. I'm curious, what are you most excited about looking towards the future, whether that be for yourself or economic development in different communities in Ontario?
Well, in terms of the future for the profession, I'm sitting back and I'm just sort of assessing in awe the advancement of technology, particularly AI, and the impact they'll have on our profession and communities within the province. I mean, I am no AI expert. I maybe use a little bit of chat GPT, but I have a lot of way to go up that curve listening to the speakers on AI and where is it taking it. Secondly, I enjoy looking at the young professionals who are now taking over and being part of making their communities better. That really gives me pride. As I mentioned to you, through the training of the year 1, year 2 master's programs. And third, I'm really pleased to see the increased diversity, cultural diversity, as well as the female representation of our membership in the profession. It has really blossomed. When I started year 1, I think there was 3 females in that class. And wow, it's changed. It's a different atmosphere. So it's come a long way, the profession. For myself, I'm just relaxing, enjoying the simple things in life and taking a pause. And who knows what I'll do if I'm asked to do something. Maybe not on a full-time basis, but you never know. You never know who will come out of the woodworks and say, George, I need some help. Maybe I'll give it a shot.
I love that. Being open to opportunities.
Yeah, always keep an open mind. You never know where it will come out. And you'll seize it and take it. I think at this stage of my life, I don't need to take anything full-time or permanent, but maybe a one-off here, one-off there, just to keep my mind active. At this stage of your life, you have to keep active, both mentally as well as physically.
Sage advice.
Someone told me the other day, motion is lotion. So
Motion
That's
is lotion.
or so.
I like that. It's good, but no, it's like if you think of your body like a vehicle, you got to make sure
Yeah.
that things don't get rusty and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense.
And through LinkedIn, I see an article or I see a survey or something, I fill things in, even though I'm not directly in the profession. I'm just looking for changing trends, keeps me thinking about, can I tap my memory bank?
Gotcha.
So,
Speaking of tapping your memory bank, George, closing tradition on the podcast, I always ask a mystery question. So my
ooh,
question for you today is outside of the world of George as the economic developer who's had all this experience, what is the best life advice that someone has given you?
the best life advice is this: to be open to people, find the good in people, put them ahead of you, and work hard and be respectful, and hopefully make a better world.
Beautiful. Well, George, thank you so much for helping make the world a lot more beautiful and better, not only through your service, but through this discussion today. I know you've made a big impact already in my life, and I just wanted to thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time to join us on the Hyperlocal podcast today and share that wealth of experience and advice with others in the field.
Thank you as well for this opportunity. Keep moving forward, Mason. These are really educational. It brings, I think, the dynamics, the technical stuff and the soft stuff, put it together, the podcasts, and we're keeping the storytelling about our profession. And that's really important. And you're doing a wonderful job. Again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you to our guests for sharing their story today. What a fantastic episode of the EDCO Award winners, The Deep Dive, a special series from Hyperlocal in partnership with the Economic Developers Council of Ontario. If you found this valuable, follow Hyperlocal wherever you get your podcast and stay tuned for more conversations.